What's up, Summoners? King Blair here. Today, we're going to be going to Guild Wars and looking at the top Guild Wars defenses and breaking down how they work so that you can better build your own defenses and get some nice little green shields. So there's going to be something part of a new series where every Monday I go over some PvP analysis. So I might call it Match Analysis Mondays or just PvP Mondays. So you always get that consistent Monday uploads about PvP contents and you can stay up to date with all the good stuff. But if you do like the video, make sure you like, subscribe, and Discord server, link in the description, and let me know any questions that you want to see, or any PvP content you want me to break down, or any unit you want me to showcase that I do own. So without further ado, let's get right into it. As far as how the video will play out, I will first give you guys some general quick tips on Guild Wars defenses that you have to know when you're looking at defenses that are important to know. Then we'll actually go and talk about different defenses that my current guild that I'm in, actually has. I'll actually be looking at all the fortresses in particular, and then we'll look at a couple of the opponents since they're around top 50. Right now we are top 8 guild, so we're pretty up there. And yeah, that should give you a good idea on and I'll also show at the end the gear so you get a good idea of the level of gear that you have to have for top level Guild Wars. So without further ado, let's get right into it. So general tips for Guild Wars. The first thing to know is that there is no perfect defense. That is one of the biggest things that you just have to accept, right? Everything is going to lose to something. You can never make a defense that is going to have a win rate that's always going to be good, that is never going to be countered. There will always be a counter to your defense, and that's important to note, and that's something that will help you actually build your defense. And that goes into the next points for general tip building. The first one is you want to add as much RNG as possible. That means that you want to bait the opponent and try to make RNG happen that it's not safe for them to take certain units against your team, making it harder for them to have all the units and giving you the possibility of potentially getting really good high rolls on your defense and getting a win, right? Which is why RNG units are so good in Guild Wars, is because, again, they have that layer of I don't know what's going to happen. So that's general tips. First, know that you're not going to be winning at everything. 2, try to add RNG that will make the fight harder for the opponent to actually beat you. And 3, try to bait the opponent into doing something so that you're able to get some dubs that way. The other thing would be to just try to bait something with one defense and with the other that will be counter. For example, that would look like something if I'm using Fallen Cecilia right here. If I had an Apocalypse Ravi, and here let's say I decide to use Rylet. If I have a Ravi and Rylet, they only have Doris, which is really common, they can only take Doris to one of the defenses. And if they decide to take it to a bottom one, that means they won't have it for the top one, and vice versa. So you do want to have units that are hard to counter with harder units, right? It'll make more sense when we talk about the actual defenses. But with that, let's actually look at the defenses and break them down. First, I'm going to be looking at mine, and I will be showing the units at the end, again, as I mentioned, so you guys get the builds that I'm actually using on these units, so you get an idea of the level of gear that's actually all the way up here. So, first, on the top one, why does this one work? FCC, Emeru, Rimuru. This is actually a defense that almost all the fortresses in Thick have, including even the big one. The big reason why this defense in particular is so efficient is because of the bait factor and the RNG factor. So the first thing is going to be Fallen Cecilia. Gives a very big barrier, making the units inherently tanky. Mercedes has the RNG, as we talked, RNG is important, to proc that S2 and to do damage. And the Rimuru is there to do, again, big damage, especially if they decide to take Craw into a Meru or into a regular Meru. He can do significant damage to the Craw to a point where if the Meru procs an S2, the Craw may not live, right? So typically that's what you see with this defense. Very high damage, a lot of RNG, both from Rimuru and from Mercedes. Although you can't bait the Rimuru, the Mercedes is a complete, you never know what she's going to be doing, and that adds a lot of layers of RNG. So now you may be thinking, oh, Fallen Cecilia, doesn't that mean that this defense just loses to Operator Sigrid? Well, no. Actually, no. And a lot of the defenses and the wins that you'll see this defense have, that I have, is going to be against Operator Sigrid teams, right? The reason being is that is the bait, right? That's the part of the bait, is because they see the Fallen Cecilia, they think that they can come in and Operator Sigrid it. Well, where the part comes in is that this Rimuru is going to be 20,000 HP on Proof of Valor, right? I took that into consideration. With Proof of Valor, with the Aureus on Fallen Cecilia, Rimuru will not die to an Operator Sigrid, right? That's just, it's not going to happen. He has way too much damage mitigation. They're not going to be killing. And if they don't kill, he gets to steal the attack buff, gives it to Meru, takes a turn, kills a unit, decreases defenses because they had attack buff, and you just win the game, right? So right there, that is going to be one of the big ways that you actually win. On the other hand, the Mercedes as well, you may be thinking, well, can't you use Milim, right? And you saw a lot of people using Milim to try to get rid of her so she doesn't revive. Well, this Mercedes is again also extremely tanky on counter set, which also gives her that extra layer of RNG to actually win the fight, right? And that's the type of gear that you need to be able to get all these bait green shields, right? Because a lot of the green shields I got was because I was baiting with the Rimuru, and the Mercedes was able to do some damage. We do see some Bruiser wins as well, just because, again, this team does do very high damage with Meru, having insane level high attack with counter set, and being tanky with the Fawn Cecilia. Again, there are ways to counter it, though it's not perfect. Usually, Crawl does really good into this defense if you have a good Crawl, because he can tank the Rimuru, and if he's able to tank the Mercedes, and you have like a Roel on the side, and then a really strong DPS like an A Ravi, you're slowly going to win, and you're probably going to win that fight, right? It's just going to take a little bit longer. But again, if they're using A Ravi for the top one, that means they can't use it for the bottom one, right? And vice versa. So that's the big reason why A Ravi is really good against his defense, but she's also really good against the second one, so it forces the opponent to actually use it for the top. And that's what I was talking about baiting units, right? So that's why that defense is so successful. There's a lot of RNG to it. There's a lot of different aspects. Now let's look at the second defense that I actually run. This one actually has a lot more counters that I'll be going over. But the way that this one works is, first you have a Conquer Lilias that is very high base speed. A lot of people are going to want to cleave this defense, right? A lot of people, right? Because they're like, if I outspeed, I can potentially win. And you do see that some people are successful. The RNG, though, is that they don't know how fast my Conqueror Lilias is, right? So if they don't properly prepare for her, again, the bait aspect of it, they will get outsped if there's speed RNG, and then that will set me up for some pretty good success. And this defense actually has won against some top guilds. I think it won against one of the higher guilds. The other part is going to be that they often will try to tank it out with something like a Doris, but want to go aggressive to try to deal with the Belian and Nessie Lilias. Well, the part where that doesn't particularly work is because this Rylait is a speed Rylait on very high attack that is able to come in, one-shot a unit, and potentially even one-shot a Doris if they don't have that proper mitigation for her, and often will win a lot. And then, of course, the line is there to stop certain types of cleaves, so that you're not getting free cleave, and also adds a layer of RNG with the counter set as well as with the Elra Sword, so that she's able to do significant amount of damage, potentially do some of those extra S2s. Injury, of course, will probably be better in this situation, but again, very strong defense, and it has gotten a lot of wins. Now, those that have counters, absolutely, it has a lot. So, Cecilline destroys his defense, right? Just auto loses to his defense, but it's not that common of a unit, right? Not everyone has Cecilline or knows to use Cecilline on the second match, and there's some chance that if they don't bring Rona, I can't actually win that. So again, Cecilline really hard counters his defense. I personally use Rimuru, my own Clilias, and Rylait, right? Just Clilias against his defense also wins. So Clilias and Cecilline do very good into this defense because they're able to deal with the primary threads. But again, not everyone has those premier units, right? And that's what you want. Not everyone has those premier units, and there's enough RNG with Belian that you have a chance to just outright win the defense, right? So that's going to be one of the my personal Guild Wars defense. But now let's look at some other ones that also get a ton of wins. This one gets a lot of wins against upper level players. So now let's actually look at these other ones. The second one, it does okay, right? It did good in this Guild War, but for the most part, it's not one of the stronger defenses, so I'll only be covering the top one. Again, this is another Clilias defense because there is a lot of speed RNG attached to what she actually does. But this one, you take RNG and you push it all the way up, right? So you have the Conqueror Lilias that could outspeed an opponent. You have Ram that has the opportunity to counterattack several times in a match, potentially countering, setting some nasty debuffs, and if you kill something, goes into demon mode and does a ton of damage. And then of course you have good old Mercedes who can revive, does high AoE damage, and since she's AoE, you can't just crawl her normally. The other thing is that both these units, no matter who Conqueror Lilias pulls, they are going to be doing high damage. The Ram, if she has demon mode, you're just doing insane amounts of damage because decreased defense. It's the second hit, and with Mercedes, you have the 2-hit aspect to it, which you do a ton of damage that way, and you hit 2 units, and you give her a CR bar, which again makes her very scary, right? So this team extremely scary. It gets a lot of wins even against top level guilds that have all the units, because again, there is so much RNG aspects to this top defense that you can't safely beat it if you don't have the good enough gear. Now, there is one really good team that actually beats this defense that our guild actually uses, which is going to be Pilis, both to tank the Conqueror Lilias and to also give defense buff, since Conqueror Lilias will be hitting so much. Rowana, who is going to be there for healing for counterattacks to counter the Ram, and to counter the Mercedes that have those extra attack skills. And of course, Pillars also reduces counterattack and extra attack damage, right? So you get damage mitigation and healing with Rwana. And then you have someone like either a Ravi, who's just or not a Ravi in this situation because the Pillars is tanking. You have something like SSB, just doing high single target damage, just wailing on the team, and you'll eventually win that way. So Pillars, Rwana, really, really good into this defense because there's so many dual attacks and so many counters. That's probably the most reliable way to actually counter this team is some form of Rwana. But again, not everyone's going to have that, and you would lose that Rwana for the next defense, which means that in this defense, a Beliant does make a lot of sense because they probably already used the Rwana on the top defense, and the Beliant is down here, which means that they don't get Rwana for that bottom defense, for the Cecilline and the Beliant. Again, I don't know too much about the Aravi here. I would probably change it for something else. Maybe like a Cerise to try to get some more cheese, some more speed control, make it harder for the opponent to cleave, right? But again, overall, good idea. Really, really solid at team 1. This team, again, you're kind of building off of this, that they have to reuse Rwana up here, so you have less way to deal with units down here. And of course, you get the different units right here to try to get some RNG, with Cecilline having RNG attached to her with Dust Devil, Beliant having RNG just inherently with counter attacking and Elver's Sword, and then Ravi, if she's counter set, again, more ways that you may lose the fight. So it's going to be that defense. Again, very, very strong defense for the top one. Sealilis is just an incredibly good unit for that first slot. And then, of course, as far as the last defense, for our fortress, you do see the same one that I mentioned, and you do see the second one down here, except instead of Mercedes, you do see Cecilline. This does, again, doesn't lose as hard to Rwana, but it does lose pretty hard to Pillars, unless the Cecilline is able to put in enough damage. But again, very good other side to actually use on this team. Although usually against this team, I would just use Polides and Violet, right? Because Violet does really good into this type of teams because you're easily able to deal with the Rem. And then you can have something like a Polides to deal early on with the Cecilline, although that makes it so you can deal with it later. So again, Celilius, very, very good with Rem, and very, very good with Mercedes, very, very good with the Lion, right? That's kind of what I want you guys to start seeing. And then last but definitely not least, we have the guild leader of Thick, who's going to be Kumo, who is going to be at the very top at the main stronghold. He does run a Rand Samurai Seria RB defense, and I'll break down why this one works, even though it also does have a counter. And he also does run the Beliant a Ravi Rimuru, again, because it takes away some of the counters that you may be using. So, as far as the top team, the reason why this defense works in particular is because a lot of people will try to Rimuru you, right? That's the main way that people try to deal with this defense, because they see Rand, they think Rimuru. The thing is, with Rand and Samurai Seria, what you're trying to do is have a very fast, high damage Arbiter Vildred that if they bring in Rimuru, but your Rand hits that Rimuru, after the Samurai Seria pushes up, that RB will be killing that Rimuru with a decreased defense if it procs a gap, right? So it's more of a cleave defense, and because Rand is the way he is, it's a little bit harder to cleave this defense as well, right? You have a lot of ways to actually push your team up. And you get immunity, so it stops Polides from actually stopping you all the way, right? So this team, even though it can lose to Rimuru, it's a little bit harder because there's that extra RNG factor that Rand could just hit everyone with a decreased defense, and you could just get blown up by an Arbiter Vildred. And if you don't take Rimuru into it, then the Samurai Seria could potentially be a problem with the bombs as well as the RB damage. These cleave defense, I honestly think this is the only Rand defense that will actually work, but it requires a very good RB because he has to essentially one-shot a team or he will be easily taken out. This was against one of the top guilds, and you can see that they just kind of tanked it out with oh, that's before he even tried this defense, so he didn't get to try this guild war, but I do see it a lot. It's a very, very strong defense, very hard to deal with because it has so many RNG aspects to it. Who does she land the bomb to? Does Rand land all the decreased defense? Does the RB get a gap, right? There's a lot of ways that it can crack a lot of different teams, which makes it quite scary. And then, of course, this bottom one, again, just mainly very high DPS that are all RNG type, right? But with Rimuru. So that's going to be for that defense. So as you can see, this is going to be part one because there's definitely a lot more really good defenses. But the big ones is going to be Mercedes, Rimuru because he does so much high damage, and Celilius because he's such a good core. If you're doing a cleave defense like the Rand defense, you do have to make sure that it's with RB or it's a little bit more susceptible to losing. But of course, just to show you guys, one of the defenses that we actually struggled with a little bit today was against this tower. Again, you see the one I personally use, and then on this one you also do see the FCC Rem Cecilline. Again, the big thing is you want to try to bait Operator Sigma teams, right? even with this team, Operator Sigurd has a good chance to lose to, especially if this Celine is really fast, or if this Rem is on Proof of Valor. Again, if I was doing this team, I honestly wouldn't put Sigurd sights on my Rem. I would give her Proof of Valor, and I would bait Operator Sigurd's like nothing, right? If I was him, right? Granted, I don't think that's what he did, but if that was me, I would put a Proof of Valor, bait the Operator Sigurd's, because then they don't get anything, they don't get the S3, and then you just win off the Cecilline and the Ram just harping on the opponent. You already have the Cecilline to like keep your life. So a team very, very dangerous. Very, very solid team. Again, a lot of RNG, a lot of ways to actually deal with the opponent. This one we didn't particularly struggle with, but they are a top 50 team. Again, you do see the Lilias, you do see the Rem, you see another option with Landy. You do see a Robbie, Beeline, Remro. I don't know why that's such a popular defense. I guess the big thing is that there is a lot of damage on this team and a lot of injury, because if this is an injury Beeline and an A Robbie, you can't particularly tank it, but it looks quite easy to cleave. Granted, we don't struggle with it a lot, but someone might actually struggle with it if they're not able to deal with it. Yeah, that team doesn't really win a lot against a lot of the guilds that they've been fighting. Yeah, it does win occasionally, so it definitely can work. I don't know, this one's kind of weird. I guess he was just probably lost all his buffs. But again, this should give you a good idea on some of the teams that top players are using, some of the RNG. This is another one that I actually think is pretty cool. Again, the Rand Samurai Seria, but they don't have the RB. If this was an RB, it'd be way more scarier. And then of course their Stronghold, I think they just got completely annihilated. But again, you do see the Lilias, a Meru. You see a lot of Merus, right? And then you do see a lot of Fawn Cecilia, Ram, Cecilline. Again, a lot of the units are going to be ML. But now I'll go over my actual unit build, so you get to see what I'm actually using for my defenses. So you're gonna see some stat lines of the units that I have, how I'm able to bait and all that good stuff. One big thing is that if you don't have a Lion, Lilias, a Robbie, all these different defensive units, hopefully this give you a better tip. The big thing is you want to bait your opponent, and you want to have high damage RNG units that the opponent can't particularly deal with, right? So I would just suggest, if you're ever thinking of a defense, talk with someone about it. What can people bring? How are you gonna bait them? How are you winning, right? You need a win condition. And a lot of people don't actually have a win condition to actually win Guild Wars, which is where you get the weaker defenses. But again, there's a lot of different variations. There's a lot of different teams I couldn't show. But over time, I'll just show them over there and here. But as far as my actual team, let me actually show you my Mercedes. This is my Mercedes. I personally run her on counter set. She is quite tanky to potentially survive the Millims. That's the big reason for her having this build. She's on counter set again to potentially counter on those Millims and kill them, because if she triggers a counterattack and a magic for friends on a Millims S1, there's a really good chance that that Millim is going to die, right? Because I have very high offensive stats on her, and of course immunity, so I can't just get cheesed. Especially because I'm a fortress, so there's a lot of ways that they can give information between each other. But again, this is my Meru. Pretty decent, does really good job. Honestly gets me most of my wins. The Rimuru right now, as I mentioned, to bait Operator Sigurd. He is very tanky, but he still has really decent offensive stats, so he's still able to do good S1, S3 damage. But the big thing is that he's going to be surviving, he's going to be hitting, and he's going to be stealing buffs for the Meru, right? That's how you bait the Operator Sigurd defense, or the offense. And again, of course, Proof of Valor to make sure that you don't die, because this, in combination with the Fallen Cecilia barrier, in combination with the Proof of Valor passive, he's not going to be dying. And of course, the Fallen Cecilia herself, she does have to have pretty high health. I do still have to get better boots for her to actually get her to that 30k level that I'm trying to reach her at. But right now, this does work pretty decently for me. She does have high defense, because some people with cross will try to focus her down, so she does need to survive. If that does happen, decent speed to try to cycle, and then crit rate just happened to be that way with the gear that I had her on. But of course, need a huge update on this S2, because I could be getting way more speed and have flat attack to get that 30k HP barrier and make it even harder for them to kill my defense. But again, it gets the job done, so I haven't really gotten a chance to upgrade her. As far as my second defense, here's my Conqueror Lilias. She is very fast. This will speed contest units up to 310, right? Because of the way that speed RNG works, I can actually contest 310 units, so they do run the risk of actually messing up. She's also has some decent effectiveness in case they do try to ER tanker. And of course, Warnhorn, the big reason is because I want to be doing more damage with my team, which is why I gave her this. As far as my Rylet, this is my particular Rylet. He's not complete, but he's almost there. The big thing is that he's fast, and this will speed contest things up to 262. So if they try to melee me, there is a chance that I'll be able to cut in and kill. This will kill most units with vigor. Ideally, I would change this chest and then change the boots, and be able to have a much more aggressive Rylait that is going to be doing significantly more damage and maybe even be a little bit faster, right? Because there's a lot of stats lost right here. I do need it for the crit rate, but it is replaceable. It's something I can get in the future, make him better, make him do more damage, and maybe even reach to 60 so he can potentially outspeed a 270 type unit. Right, so that's my Rylait. Again, he's there to one-shot units in case the opponent tries to tank me up. And then, of course, Naiba Lion, who could be on injury, but right now I do have her on counter set to be more annoying. And, of course, almost 100% crit rate on Elris Sword to try to trigger those things, and has a little bit of effectiveness, which was not there on purpose. Not the best one out there. I definitely would love it if she was 2400 HP, so she'd be doing more damage. But this does get the job done for the most part. So that is going to be it for today. I hope you all enjoyed, and I will see you next time. Peace.